Hello and welcome to the Creative Pod. In this podcast, we talk on a range of topics from photography, painting, writing, and much more. The goal is that you find value in every episode and hopefully find inspiration to get creative in your own unique way and ultimately become a better member of the society. I'd like to thank shishirratanart.com for supporting and enhancing this video. If you are looking out for a photographer, original abstract art on canvas, or looking to read a blog, head over to shishirratanart.com. Social media links are in the description. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Creative Pod, and we continue on the Basics series. Our journey brings us today to the shutter speed. Like I mentioned earlier, the shutter speed is one of the three important components of the exposure triangle, the other two being ISO and aperture. In my previous episode, I covered aperture, so I hope you guys are clear on what and how an aperture affects what our ultimate image is going to be looking at. In today's episode, we will delve further on shutter speed and understand how does that play a key role in deciding what our images will be looking like. A quick recap on aperture. Aperture is the component that controls how much of the light is going to be coming towards the sensor and exposing the image. We can also control the depth of field using aperture. Now, that is not the only thing which is important. Shutter speed is equally important. Now, to understand what is shutter speed and why is it even called shutter speed, we need to dissect this particular term. There are two words here, shutter and speed. To understand shutter, we have to go back to the film era, the days when photographs were taken using a roll of film. The concept of shutter speed has not changed from what it was during the film days, but why I'm taking you back is just to help you understand a little bit about what shutter speed is all about. Just a little historical context always helps with a little more intrigue, right? So now, a film is basically think of it like a roll of plastic that is having a coating which is light sensitive, meaning the moment light hits that coating, it tends to chemically change and imprint whatever the light has hit on the film. Now, some guy thought that what if I were able to throw light at this film in a way that it captures what is in front of it. At the end of the day, what is an image? Nothing but a reflection of light rays coming from different parts of the surrounding and hitting the film or the sensor. So that's how film photography was born. But now the question is, how do we make sure that the light is just right? It is just enough. That's where shutter speed comes in. You see, while the aperture is controlling how much of light is coming to the sensor, it is also important to control for how long will that light be hitting the sensor or the film. Whenever a particular film was right behind the shutter curtain and the shutter button was pressed, based on a particular time, say 1/10 of a second, 1/500th of a second, or 1 second, whatever it might be, the setting. For that length of time, the shutter would actually roll across the film, and then the light would actually be hitting the film in that way. So it was controlling for how long the exposure or for how long the film is actually exposed. So if you have too less light, rather if you are having light hitting the sensor for a short period of time, your image will be dark. If the light is hitting the sensor for a long period of time, then your images will be brighter. Now let's come back to the digital sensor. I hope you're enjoying the episode. I just wanted to take a brief moment to say that we are open to feature your business or podcast on our channel. If you're interested, please drop a line on Facebook or Instagram to talk details. And now, let's continue with the episode. Not much has actually changed from the digital and the film era from a concept standpoint. The only big change is now, instead of a film and a chemical process, we have a more of an electronic and digital process, where the film is replaced by a digital sensor, which is also doing the exact same job of a film, basically getting exposed to the light and capturing what hits it, basically capturing the rays from the surroundings that is hitting the sensor. Concept is the same. We all have understood that shutter speed controls for how long light is hitting the sensor. Now, why is this important? Well, one way is we can control in low light situations for how long the sensor is going to be exposed to the light rays. That way, we can ensure that even though the light is less, it will be hitting the sensor continuously and exposing it even more and more with every passing fraction of a second. So that way we can ensure that there is more light hitting and the image is still exposed in a way that people can make out what the image is all about. The other way that shutter speed is important is by ensuring that it is able to capture motion. That's right, capturing motion. What does capturing motion mean? Well, think about a sports event. Now, in any sports event, what typically happens is there is a lot of quick movements. People move here, there, and everywhere, but in very quick movements. So, how do you ensure that you're able to capture that moment when the ball is hit by a particular person? Well, that is exactly where shutter speed is your best friend. If you set your shutter speed to something like 1/500th of a second, or 1/1000th, or 2000th, or 1/8000th of a second, it means that your sensor is being exposed to the light for that fraction of a time. Keep in mind, shutter speed is always in fractions of a second. It can range from 30 seconds all the way till 1/8000th of a second. In some cameras, I believe it goes even further than that. So that is ultimately the main function of a shutter speed, exposing your sensor to as less or more time as possible. In some cameras, there is something called a B mode, B for ball. So that's also known as bulb mode. Essentially, what happens in that is you can keep your shutter open indefinitely. That's a topic which I can cover in one of the future episodes focused more around low light photography. But just for your knowledge, I would like to tell you that you're not limited by the amount of time the camera is giving you. Most cameras have a bulb mode as well. But just so you know, you can leave your shutter open for an even longer period of time depending on your requirement. Alright, getting back to the basics. Let's talk about some very practical examples of where shutter speed can actually be used. Now, I gave you an example of a sporting event, right? Where fast motion can be captured with a very short period of time where the shutter is open and allowing light to hit the sensor. So something like 1/500th, in some cases 1/1000th. But again, keep in mind, shutter speed doesn't work in isolation. Your ISO and aperture also play a big role for how long or short period of time you keep the shutter speed or you keep the shutter open, essentially. Keeping the sports segment aside, now let's go back to the opposite end of the spectrum. Let us say you're at a wedding and the bride and the groom are exchanging their vows, and the groom is about to put a ring on the bride's finger. Now, this could be done in any place depending on the community, but to keep things simple, let's just assume that it's indoors, and for simplicity's sake, let's assume you have sufficient amount of lighting. You don't have to worry too much about external lighting and whatnot. Lighting is good enough. Now in this case, what do you think would be your shutter speed? I don't need a number, but just think, if in the sporting event you had your shutter being open for a short period of time to be able to capture the quick motion. In this case, well, it's not a sport, right? And it's a rather solemn occasion. So the ring ceremony is very deliberate. It is done very carefully. There are no quick movements. So it's all at a very normal pace. So do you think the shutter speed will be set to a very short period of time, like 1/8,000th of a second, or it would be open for a little longer since the motion is not that quick? Well, obviously it will be at a much slower pace compared to an action shot, right? So you might probably looking at something around 1/100 or 1/200, maybe even slower, maybe 1/50 for all you know, because your lighting is sufficient, your movement is not too much. What I'm trying to highlight here is that the movement is one of the key players in deciding what your shutter speed is going to be. Now, let's further this a little more. Let's say your shutter speed is at 1/15th of a second or 1/30th of a second, or let's go further out, 1/8th of a second. Now, when you hear 1/8th of a second, it seems very small period of time, right? It's like 1/8, it's not even 1 second, it's less than a second. True. But when it comes to photography, believe me, that is an extremely slow speed. What happens when you set your camera to 1/8th of a second? Let me tell you. If you have your DSLR, in fact, I would say pick it up, go to manual mode, set your shutter speed to 1/8th of a second, open up your aperture to as wide as you can get, and try and keep your ISO as low as possible. So keep it at ISO 100. Go out during the midday. This has to be done in daytime. Go out in midday. Now point at anything and take a shot. You will notice two things. One, it is extremely bright, almost whitish color. The other thing, if at all you do capture anything apart from blank white, you might notice that there is a heavy blur. Don't worry, your lens is fine, but that blur is called motion blur. What happens is the sensor is exposed to the light for 1/8th of a second, but when we are holding the camera, very typically it happens that human hands are not the most perfect stable hands ever, right? We are not a tripod, of course. Our hands have very tiny minute movements which tends to get picked up by the camera and results in camera shake, which also can result in motion blur when the shutter speed is so low. So what is the difference between camera shake and motion blur? Well, camera shake, obviously camera is shaking because of what? The person holding the camera. Like I said, we are not absolutely stable, right? We do have our little quirks. So camera shake can occur, because of which your images might be a little blurred. Motion blur happens when your subject is moving. Let's say you chose a wrong shutter speed and you're trying to shoot a moving car, but because the shutter speed was not fast enough, it couldn't freeze the motion, and so that movement of the car gets captured and that looks blurry, right? So these are certain things that are artifacts of shutter speed. So in this case, what do? How do you ensure that there is no camera shake and there is no motion blur? Well, that's where you have to go back to that point which I told you earlier. Shutter speed is all about for how long do you expose your sensor to the light rays that are coming to it. So to capture motion or quick motion, you should have a fast shutter speed. Anything above 1/800th of a second is pretty fast. But then again, it's not a thumb rule. You have to take a few shots and dial it in just perfect, because every single subject is a unique opportunity in itself. So you really can't put a thumb to it saying that, yeah, if this happens, I'll use so and so shutter speed and it will work. No, you have to, do a bit of trial and error, and with the experience you will learn. The other thing you need to keep in mind is When it's low light, a fast shutter speed may not help you much because it is not allowing enough light to actually hit the sensor, no matter how high your ISO or your aperture might be. So that is one of the ways to think about shutter speed. Alright, now I would say we have actually covered what shutter speed is all about. The only way you can understand this even further is by going out there and trying these things out. In one of the episodes I had mentioned one of the techniques I use, and I will tell you what that technique is in this episode and in the future episodes as well, so that if someone has not heard the previous episodes on Aperture, then you would know what I'm still talking about. So here's a technique, and this is also an activity for you. Please go ahead, try it, and let me know what you came across. What do you think? Any doubts, any questions, I'd love to answer. I have a page on Facebook called The Creative Pod. I'm also on Instagram. I'm also on YouTube with the same names. The links are in the description. Alright, time for the technique. The technique is very simple. Take out your SLR, or let me say take out your camera. When I say camera, it's an SLR or a mirrorless camera. Set it in auto mode. Take a picture. Make a note of the shutter speed, aperture and ISO. Now, set your camera back to manual mode. Now try to take the same picture with the exact same settings that you found in the auto mode. See if you got the same shot. More or less you will pretty much get the same shot. Assuming that you have not moved away from where you took the picture in auto mode, and assuming that the lighting has not changed either. Keeping those two things constant, shoot the same image with the same settings in manual mode. Keep your aperture and ISO values the same, do not change them, but instead just keep changing your shutter speed. Make it slow, make it fast, and then see how it is affecting your image. And that, my friends, is the best way to actually understand and even see the results instantaneously in front of you, how shutter speed actually affects your image. So go ahead, do that, share your pictures, ask questions to me. I would love to hear from you. The next episode will be delving into ISO, and the subsequent episode after ISO would be about how all the three come together to compose an awesome image. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to interacting with you. That concludes the episode, and we earnestly hope that the topic would have ignited your creativity or inspired you to get started on something. Please ensure to follow us and engage with us on social media. The links are in the description, and also feel free to share the podcast or the episode among your friends. Goodbye and best wishes to you.